Okay, so we will have this archived on our newly revised website, and webinars is right on the front page. And so you can go there and watch past webinars, or you'll be able to catch this webinar. It usually takes us 4 or 5 business days to get it up on our website, and also to get you out your certificate of participation. So don't give up on us. We're just doing things in order. So today we have Linda Wirt with us, and Linda has not done a webinar for us, but she was part of when we did the virtual ed camp when the pandemic was really raging back in April of 2020. We did a Saturday 4-hour virtual ed camp, and we had 30-minute slots for teachers to really envision how they could deliver their curriculum virtually. And so we thank Linda for her participation in that. And she's just been very popular over the years. She's come to our National Health Science Conference and has done several breakout sessions for us there. And so we invited her to do a webinar this semester. And I think maybe she's going to do one for us next semester as well. She is a former classroom teacher, and we know that teachers love hearing from teachers. She's from Delaware, the first state. You may have heard that tagline before. And her background is medical assisting, and she now works with Delaware HOSA. And she is available to come present at your states. She's just that engaging. So with that, Linda, if there's other things you want to share about yourself, you're welcome to do that. And we look forward to today's presentation on employability strategies.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And Nancy's going to be monitoring my chat for me. So if you have questions throughout my presentation, please don't hesitate to pop a question into the chat. I have no problem stopping and answering question rather than waiting to the end. So please feel free that if you need to, you can go ahead and pop a question in. But thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you for having me here. Good afternoon, everyone. Like Nancy said, I am Linda Wirt, and I have been a CTE instructor for over 10 years. I have taught anatomy and physiology, medical terminology, medical assisting, and I've taught them all at different levels. I've taught at the secondary level at a college, the high school level, post-secondary at a local college, and also in the private sector. I am the program manager for Delaware HOSA, and I'm also the STS mentoring program manager here in Delaware. I've presented nationally, like Nancy said, for NISHE at their annual conferences now for the past 3 years. And I've also presented for the Association of Career and Technical Education in Kansas, Mississippi, and Rhode Island. So this direct experience that I have with today's topic comes from my personal experience in the classroom. And also, I've actually written an entire employment strategies course within a medical assisting certification program at Cecil College in Maryland that is still used to this day. So I'm excited to share with you all today my suggestions on teaching employability skills in the classroom. So let's get started. First, let's answer the question of what we're going to learn today. So my goals for today's webinar are: first, learn exactly what is meant by the term employability and what skills our students are missing as they enter the workforce. Next, I will give you suggestions on how to teach some of those skills in your classroom. And after that, we will actually look at the best way to guide your students in their search for employment in the healthcare industry. This will include starting with how to actually search, how to create a resume and cover letter, and then followed by how to prepare and execute a job interview. And then lastly, I will give you suggestions on how your students can create their own networking community so they can go ahead and find those contacts for those jobs. So let's get started. First, what is meant by the term of employability? Well, I found this definition in an article by Helen Kempster from Future Learn that I feel best sums it up, especially for a high school teacher. Employability is a set of achievements, whether they be skills, understandings, and personal attributes, that makes graduates more likely to gain employment and be successful in their chosen occupations, which benefits themselves, the workforce, the community, and the economy. So basically, employability is an umbrella term for a set of highly desirable, like transferable skills that you can turn in yourself into a very attractive candidate to be a potential employee. They are a unique mix of skills, abilities, and personal qualities that you have that will make you stand out amongst the other candidates. Now, because the world of work is changing constantly and rapidly, your career is likely to involve many different job roles and possibly different employers. And even if you stay in the same job, the odds are pretty good that there's going to be some type of change in some nature over time. So employability skills are useful because they are transferable. They can go from one job to the other, one job description to another. So you can adapt them into whatever situation you find yourself in. Employability skills are valuable in every single job. So healthcare industry, yes, but also all other areas out there. They are essential skills for all students, but they are harder to teach than specific technical skills. And that's because you have environment, you have demographics, culture, that can affect the ability for students to learn these particular skills. So if we've talked to many employers, and I have, through my co-op coordinator, and reached out to employers, and they have said repeatedly, I can teach any one of my employees how to do something technically to complete their job. But what I do need is for them to come already with the qualities needed to be a successful person in that job. So what skills are students missing when they're getting ready for a job in the marketplace? Well, I have a list for you that are probably, there's many, but these are probably the top 6 that we've heard from employers that we have worked directly with high school students. So this is a list of some of the most valued employability skills sought after by employers, specifically in healthcare. They are all transferable skills, and they can be incorporated into your classroom. So then students can then bring them into the workspace. The key for students to be successful in mastering these skills is you need to be very consistent, and you need to practice them all the time. They're not like topics like you can teach and then they have to retain an information for a test and then, spit it back at you. These are skill sets that must be introduced throughout your entire curriculum. You need to scaffold them within your program, and then you need to consistently do them on a daily basis. You just don't revisit this. They need to become automatic in nature, so the student doesn't have to think to do it. It becomes automatic. And your classroom becomes that workplace for them to learn, to practice, establish certain behaviors, and you can correct them in a safe environment like your classroom, so they can make that mistake where it's someplace safe and you can correct them. So the first employability skill I'm going to talk about is I'm going to go through each one of these. I'm going to explain what I meant by it, and then I'm going to give you samples of ideas of how you can introduce that skill into your classroom. The first employability skill has been identified by 62% of recruiting professionals as the skill that gets you hired, and that's problem solving. So why is problem solving so valued? Well, the medical community specifically faces a lot of obstacles. Boy, haven't we seen that in the past couple of years, right? And those obstacles are seen by both healthcare workers and their patients. So if you are better able to cope with the challenges, you'll be able to thrive better. And unfortunately, if you're less capable, you most likely will not be able to succeed. So some ways to develop problem-solving skills is come up with activities that analyze facts and figures, where you can create and implement solutions. And then these can be taught in different activities and routines that you do in your classroom. So on the right-hand side, you'll see I have some examples of ways you can introduce problem solving into your classroom. The first example I have is case studies. This involves presenting either a patient scenario or a medical case study that allows students to have to analyze the facts and extract the information that is pertinent to create a solution for either a medical situation or a medical problem or a patient problem. And then they then use another skill, which is the communication employability skill, to then do patient education to relay that solution to the patient. The other thing I love to use for problem solving is host of competitive events. There are many. Let's say there's creative problem solving, medical innovations, research poster, because you're extracting facts and information, research persuasive writing and speaking, working on several skills, written communication and verbal. They're great ways for students to come up and use problem-solving skills. So if you want to look into those, HOSA provides the guidelines and the rubrics for you. So you don't have to just offer it as a competitive event for a student to do, incorporate it into your classroom as an assignment, and therefore all of your students can benefit from that particular HOSA event. I personally enjoy role play activities, and my students, they're quite hams. They enjoy it as well. But this is where the students get the chance to take turns being the patient and the healthcare worker in different scenarios. So it allows the student to practice, like they say that they most are looking for problem solving, is thinking fast on your feet. So if you're doing a role-playing activity, the student will have to think on their feet because every student is going to react differently or respond differently. So the answer isn't always going to be the same. So I usually introduce this softly with something like telephone etiquette. And one student's the healthcare professional answering the phone, and one is the patient who's calling with either a question about a prescription, or you can do a scenario of an angry patient. How do you handle that problem? So you can come up with different scenarios, and they actually act that out. I actually have a phone. They pick up the phone and they use the phone. So they actually feel like they're in this scenario and not just saying, well, what would you say if this happened? Actually have them act it out. So therefore, when they go into the workplace, they'll really be able to do that skill set. The last idea I've listed is more of a classroom norm than an activity. And it's called 3 Before Me. And I actually have a giant sign in the classroom that says 3 Before Me. And yes, I've gone to the extreme of wearing a t-shirt that says 3 Before Me. Right? So I tell my students that before they can come to me with a question or problem, they need to seek out 3 sources to find that answer or solution first on their own. After they've exhausted all 3 resources, if they still don't have the answer or solution, then they can come to me. But before I even help them, I still confirm what sources did you go to? And then I ask them, why do you think that was a good source to go to or a poor source to choose? So they learn how to problem solve in the future, going, where do I go? Don't keep going to the same source. What's a better way to find that answer on your own? So if you have the students stop and do this first, it teaches them ways to explore the solutions and giving them the tools that are going to be needed in the workspace. So you're not always being relied on that, and they learn how to spread out their use of resources. Next, a part of this does relate with the problem solving is communication skills. And if your students are going to be successful in their professional or their personal life, they need to be able to effectively communicate with others. And this is why communication is a fixture on any employability skills list, because students think just communication means, yeah, they get it, right? I said it and the patient gets it, but it's more about making a connection, supplying like a customer service, as you might think of it, or a patient service, and meeting the needs of others. And in order to do this, to be a good communicator, you have to listen, you have to empathize, draw logical conclusions, build rapport, adapt language to the actual audience, and act accordingly to the information after it is gathered. So in order to do all of this, you need to make sure that you have identified whether, what skills they are lacking. Now, I know many teachers play communication games, and I'm not going to put down communication games. I know we play telephone or back to back, and you draw something or you tell somebody else what to do. Those are great little activities to just broach the subject, but those games might identify if you're a good sender or receiver, but they don't teach you, now what do you do? Okay, I'm not a good sender and I'm not a good receiver. So how do I develop these better communication skills? It takes much more time and attention because it can't be done in just one activity. So what can you do in your classroom to develop those skills? Well, here are some suggestions on the right-hand side. One way is to choose several topics and do a modified version of a flipped classroom. I never really was a fan of flipped classrooms until I started making them into smaller chunks and then building up. I think the task was too overwhelming initially. So if you aren't familiar with a flipped classroom, it's an instructional strategy where the student reads and researches and actually becomes what we call the topic expert outside of the classroom, and then comes back and shares and teaches either the whole class or small groups of peers what they learned. They can communicate that information in whatever way they feel will best relay it to their audience effectively. So this type of model teaches students several ways to communicate with others, since most likely they're going to need a combination of both verbal and visual techniques in order to communicate this. So I'd start off with topics that are much smaller and not too in-depth or technical, so they can build those skills of acquiring it outside the classroom and then bringing it back into the classroom. It helps build their communication skills and help build some self-confidence. Another activity that actually spans an entire chapter on developing written communication skills is this, what I have here called the medical facility activity. And what I do is I divide the entire class into small groups, and I have them create their own medical facility. They decide what the specialty is of their practice, the staff, the titles of the employees in the group, a logo, marketing information for their practice. And they stay in those medical facilities for the entire chapter. And they learn to communicate between the facilities. And then they also do that through different tasks and assignments that I give for that entire. And that usually this takes about 2 weeks to complete. The first task I give them is to create some type of social media presence and how they're going to communicate to the public about their particular facility. Then I move them into contacting employees between the other practices. So I'll have one office manager contact another office manager in another facility via email. And then finally, each employee has to compose a letter and send it to a patient. And by doing this, I consistently have the students working on written communication skills, because a lot of students don't have written communication. What do? They take their phone and they text, right? They don't use punctuation anymore. They don't do anything like that. So to work on the written communication skills, I do several tasks through communicating back and forth between medical facilities that they have decided what they want to do and what kind of practice they want. They usually have a lot of fun with it. They come up with their logos and then they communicate back and forth. Hosted, once again, competitive events do have several different competitive events that utilize communication, but I'd have to say my ultimate favorite for communication is health education. And that's because the students have to adapt how they communicate with their audience based on the demographics of their lesson and how they present. Because in health education, you pick a topic and then an age group that you're going to present that to. So it is working on both avenues there of communication and adapting your language to the audience. The last idea I'd like to share is called patient counseling. And this can be done with every single skill and every medical condition that you might introduce in your anatomy and physiology portion of your program. What I do is I have students have to communicate to a patient. One is the health professional and one is the patient. And they have to either complete a preparation for a procedure and explain that, or they have to teach them how to manage a medical condition, whether it be treatment or medication, things like that. So you can use this activity at the end of teaching a body system or a clinical skill. And I usually used it as a formal assessment because it sums everything up, because they now have to go back and look at that information and be able to relay it to somebody else. So it's a great way to do a check at the end of presenting something to see if they completely get the topic. The next employability skill is reliability.
Linda, yes. Linda, take a breath. Okay. I did have a question from Vicki, and she asked, do you have a write-up or like a kind of a detailed description of the medical facility activity?
Yes, I do. So I'd be happy to share that.
Okay, so Vicki, just put your email address in there, and anybody else that might be interested in that, I'm going to share the chat with Linda, and she can go through and capture your email address and if you're interested in that activity. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. All right, the next employability skill is reliability. And sometimes you'll see it in an employability list as dependability. These are the foundations for all other employability skills. It is essential that students understand the importance of this valued skill. It is imperative to be successful in any career. You need somebody who's reliable and dependable. And it is basically what promotes the trust between the employee and the employer. So we want to make sure we promote this in the classroom, because employers do need reliable employees so they can have a more efficient workplace. They can deliver quality service to their clients or their patients. So we want to start this in the classroom. And there's a few ways you can instill this quality. And I know some of this might be like, you're going to shake your heads, but I'm telling you, I do this and I'm quite successful at it. And it's one of the things that needs to be practiced. This is when I said some things have to be done on a daily basis. This can be done on a daily basis. So a few of the things you're going to instill in this quality is by setting expectations and committing to them. So for example, I expect my students to come in my classroom, which is their workspace, right? Because I create a workspace environment, and they clock in every day. Now I use a biometric finger scanner. I got it off of eBay. I think it was $15. The student literally has to put their finger on the machine and it scans it, and that takes their attendance. It clocks the day and the time for me. And they're given an employee ID number. So that the machine is calculating, okay, this employee, number 7, and their finger gets scanned and then it gets checked. And I do this for a couple of reasons. First, I want to create a workplace environment, and I want to create a setting that is very different from their academic classes. They have to understand when they're coming into this class, it's different. You're coming to learn a career and a work environment. So you have to separate it somehow. You can't take attendance like all the other teachers take attendance in the building, because they're going to come in with those same types of habits. So you need to break that. So I try to mimic what they might be doing in a real work environment. It could be clocking into a computer, whatever you want to do. But the reason why I do the finger scanner brings me to my second part, which is you can't sign in for anybody else. So I used to have a sign-in sheet, and then all of a sudden everyone's, Louise's signature was all the same all the way down the page. Isn't that amazing? Everyone has the same handwriting. No, right? She signed everybody in, especially the one that was in the bathroom who showed up late, type of thing. So if you do the finger scanner, they have the accountability of you cannot check in for somebody else. And you certainly can't, that's fraud if you were to do that in the real workplace, right? You can't do that. That's stealing time from your employer. So I teach that by implementing that into the classroom, so they understand that this is what you do in a real workplace. You don't sign in for anybody else, and you're responsible for yourself getting to work and getting there on time. So those are the two main reasons. The third reason why I do this, which might end up being the most important reason, is because it gives an objective summary that shows that student's reliability. So I can print out a report, and it shows to a potential employer, perhaps, the attendance record of a student. And it reflects the reliability of showing up, right? They showed up to their job, which is coming to your class. So I used to get in some situations where, when they want your opinion about a student, would this student be a good employee? This removes my opinion completely. I have something objective to show a potential employer. I go, here you go. You can take it. You don't have to worry about my word. It's right here. And on the flip side, I'm not talking poorly about a student. If they want my opinion, I will submit that to them. And then they get it. And they're like, ooh, that person, it seems they've got Fridayitis. They're out every Friday, right? So they can see that and track that. And the heat is off of me, the teacher, because I'm not talking badly about a student. I'm just objectively showing a report that shows their attendance and the reliability. So I'd have to say, out of all the reasons, that's probably the best one, but I do use it for the other reasons, which is increasing that whole reliability of being a good employee, coming in responsibly for yourself and checking in. But I'd have to say the most bang for my $15 was the fact that when a potential co-op or an employer asked me, so how is this person dependable? Well, let me show you their attendance report for the last 6 months. And then I just print it out, because the software can, you have a USB, you put it right in your computer and it prints it out. So best $15 I ever bought off of eBay. Another way to instill reliability is setting deadlines. And the biggest thing is sticking with those deadlines. So I give students quite a bit advance notice of big projects or assignments, and then I make sure I keep those deadlines in place. Our school had alumni come back and share with teachers specific reasons of how they felt prepared for their next part of their life after high school, and what they felt was lacking in their high school education before they graduated. And guess what they said? All the teachers are sitting there going, really? You're saying this now? And they all said, yep. They repeatedly said that they struggled with deadlines because they were cut too much slack in high school, that they were given too many chances. and that they didn't realize that you're not given all those chances repeatedly in the workplace or in college. When the college said it's the deadline, it's the deadline. That's it. It's the end of semester. So they felt that we weren't doing that in high school because they're like, well, okay, you know, you can have another day or you can have another week and that type of thing. And they said that doesn't happen in the real world. And you enabled us by not having solid deadlines. So always make sure you give plenty of notice and time so they can manage their time, which is going to be one of our other employability skills we're going to talk about. But you need to demonstrate that quality of being on time and sticking with the deadline is met, because we want to instill that for them to be able to carry that on. And all the teachers were like, you're now telling us we shouldn't be so nice. They're like, no, be nice, but don't keep extending things because you're hurting us. You're not helping us when we go on to the next part of our lives. So I thought that was really good feedback. And it was almost every alumni was shaking their head going, yep, that's true. That's true. So, and the last thing I'd like to share is incentives. I help students set up their own incentives to keep on task. So some people are motivated by different things, and you're going to have to find out what drives different students. And it's not for you to come up with the incentive. You teach the student to come up with their own incentive. And I say to them, this is because you might have an employer that offers incentives to their employees for certain things. A lot of them is a rollover of vacation. You have such great attendance, you can roll over a week, right? So employers do have different things in place to instill behaviors or outcomes that have to do with reliability and dependability. But on the flip side, there are some employers who don't. So how do you keep those students still being reliable and dependable? You teach them to set their own incentives. And it can be something of a treat going to the movies, or, you know, my students would come up with all these different things. Oh, I'm going to go and get my nails done or something. They could be small little things like that, you know, that they just are rewarding themselves for. You know, I had one student that she never had a complete week. I went like 3 months and she never had a complete week of school. And I said, what can we do how can we change that? What would make you want to come in? And believe it or not, it was that she wanted to just be able to sit down and have lunch with her friends. And it was a certain day of the week that her friends either had a different class or something, and they couldn't make that happen. So I said, well, if I can make that happen for one day, would you do it? And she said yes. And she had perfect attendance for 1 month. And then I worked with the other teachers, and we had 30 minutes that she could have lunch with her friends that she missed. And it was identifying what would it take for you to become more dependable and reliable. And she was perfect after that. She just needed that one little thing to make her feel self-centered with her friends back in the loop. And it worked beautifully. So teaching them to set their own incentives is great, because not all employers set them. They need to learn how to set those incentives themselves, and they will develop that reliability and dependability skill. The next employability skill can be easily adapted. I know a lot of you probably do group type of things. Collaboration and teamwork is very much identified, especially in the healthcare industry. And this skill does rely on the ability to everyone work harmoniously with your colleagues. And we all know that can be challenging, but we have to make sure we all have that shared goal that we want to meet. And collaboration can increase your hiring chances, because you do have that common goal to make things more effective. Also, I explained that if you work collaboratively and as a team player, you will have a more positive work environment, because you want to increase employee satisfaction and you want them retained. We don't want a job hopper, right? We want our students to have a career, not multiple jobs. So if we can, you know, how many people say, I love where I work because I love the people that I work with, right? So you want to create that. You want to have that environment. And in the medical community, all members of the healthcare team have to work together. And that healthcare team includes the patient, right? So we have to make sure that skill is developed, because it's great value working in the field of medicine, because that patient is part of your healthcare team. In your healthcare, you're working with different backgrounds, you're working with different ages, religions, cultures. So patients come from all different demographics. And as I always, it's my little mantra I say over, you don't get to pick your patients, right? They all come in. You can't pick a patient. The patient walks in the door and you just have to be able to work with that patient. So you need to teach them these collaboration and teamwork skills, because you have to be able to work with everybody equally. And it's important to recognize also what your weaknesses are working in a team, because you have your strengths and you have your weaknesses. So in order to have a positive outcome, you have to know what your strengths and your weaknesses are, and you have to be accountable for the results, whether they be positive or they're negative, right? You have to assess the team and you have to adapt moving forward so everybody can be successful. You also can take this opportunity to teach how do you deal with conflicts that arise within that team, right? Because it's important that team members resolve them in a productive way so that that goal can be met. So how do we develop this? And as I said, I'm sure a lot of you do group projects, but I have a question for you. Do you assign specific roles to each participant in the group, or you just say, this is a group project and let it go, right? You need to give clear guidelines for the role of each person in the group. And if you don't assign specific jobs with details of what they need to do, what happens? The same student volunteers to what? Be the leader, right? And we don't want that. We want everyone to be able to develop the skill of being a leader of a group. So I have come through all these years of and talking to students and saying, you know, I thought you'd be really good at this. Why didn't you step up? And it wasn't that they didn't have the desire to be the leader of the group or their team, it's they didn't know how to be an effective team member. So if you give them the specific instructions and guidelines for each member in the group for the assignment, then they know what the expectations are to be a leader and to be a team member. They know what is expected of them. So let me go back to the medical facility activity I was telling you about. Each person in that group got a job description because they created a medical facility, right? So each one of them got a job description, and in that job description were their expectations. What type of role would they do? So for instance, I had office manager, clinical medical assistant, administrative medical assistant, biller coder. Those are just a few. And each one of those had a job description. So once they identified who was doing what, then we went ahead and we gave the job descriptions so they knew the parameters of the job and the expectations. So they knew how to communicate within their own group. They knew who was the office manager and who to go to a question with. And then they knew how to communicate amongst the facilities. Like one office manager knew how to contact another office manager. So they knew the roles and they understood them better. And once they know that, then you have a better team dynamic. So group projects are great, but you have to take that extra step and tell them, how do you work in a group? Just don't say, here's a group project. And then I'm telling you, it's going to be the same people doing all the work and doing all the accountability at the end. And you don't want that. You want to develop the quiet ones that don't necessarily want to speak up, but yet they have the skill set to possibly flourish in that area. So if you give those guidelines, it will definitely help them tremendously. Another important thing is to model team behavior in your classroom. And this is done by establishing the environment as a workplace specifically. So the student can see the collaboration firsthand. We don't want them to see it outside. We want to create it inside. So as I said, when my students come in the classroom, it's a workplace. So each one of them has a job when they come into the classroom. And those jobs, I was doing them monthly, but you can do them weekly if you'd like. They are graded. They're given an employability grade for how they did with that particular job. The roles that I would use in my classroom as jobs, the most popular was classroom ambassador. Anytime a guest or someone would come to my door, whether it be the principal or my supervisor doing an evaluation, the classroom ambassador would be the person that they knew if there was somebody knocking on my door, they would get up, they would greet the person, introduce themselves, tell them what was happening in the classroom, right, to get them up to speed. So that was their job. So that was a classroom ambassador. I had lab staff that were in charge of making sure the lab was put back the way it's supposed to be after doing a skill or anything like that. I had inventory people that did inventory of all the supplies. I never had to worry about what to order because they would give me my list, right? But they're going to do inventory in real life. They're going to do stock and things like that. So that was one of the skills. So there's many different jobs you can come up with. And once they see that all of these roles are important and rely on each other to make the classroom efficient, they'll understand that it takes a team for a practice to work or a team for a company to work and run smoothly and efficiently. So model it in your classroom so they then know how to be a team member when they get out there. My final suggestion is to have students collaborate with business partners and organize events or speaking engagements. This allows them to experience collaboration outside of the classroom with a professional team. Your students can collaborate with local hospitals for speakers to come in and speak about different topics. I used to have that affiliated with my HOSA all the time. I would have speakers come in. I had respiratory therapists come in. So you can have different, most hospitals have speaker bureaus. You just have to contact them. So I give that skill set to a student to collaborate. Also, my students run the entire blood drive at our school. They get the donors, they figure out the job responsibilities, and they work with the local blood bank. And year after year, I would always hear from the blood bank, your blood drive is the most organized, your students know what to do, they know what their jobs are. I would do a field trip, bring them to the blood bank so they could see firsthand, so they could better educate the donors. So they saw how it happens, real life, in the real world at the blood bank, or they spoke with the hospital, and then they saw the result once the speaker came to the classroom, and they felt this sense of accomplishment that they did that, and they learned how to collaborate outside. It's definitely putting them out of their comfort zone because they're talking to people they don't know, but it brings up that skill set of working as a team with people that you don't know yet and that you develop a relationship with. Now, being organized to plan effectively is very important because it helps you and your employer save time, obviously, effort, and money by improving that workflow. And as we know, even in medicine, it's all about the money as well, right? There's a bottom line. We all want a paycheck. So this ensures that assignments and tasks are completed on time, and it prevents confusion as to what's happening, who's doing what. And in medicine, we need time management organization so we don't have errors, right? We don't want medical errors happening. Also, if you can teach a student how to be organized and time efficient, it helps them be able to multitask. And multitasking is very important, right? The reason why some people can't multitask is because they feel unorganized. They need everything in a row. So if you want to develop the multitasking skill, we need to inset some time management and organizational skills. If you help students learn how to manage their time and organize their workspace, you're also going to teach them how to strike a balance between work and personal life. I know a lot of us as teachers struggle with that balance between work and personal life. We want our students to understand that that is very important. We don't want them to burn out. We don't want them to get frustrated. So if we teach them how to manage their time and organize their life, they'll be able to set goals, be self-motivated, and become more focused so they are more balanced between the two. I use several tools to help students organize their time and projects, and I give them a blank calendar for the entire marking period with custom-made stickers with my Cricut to mark when things are due and coming up. So I literally make custom stickers. For those of you who came to Cincinnati, you might have been in my Cricut breakout session. So I use my Cricut, I make stickers, and it literally says blood drive, chapter 7 quiz, chapter 7 test, binder check, because we do binders, all the stickers. And then we sit down all together and they put those stickers on their calendar for the entire marking period. So there's no excuse. You know all the dates to expect for that entire marking period. I don't use planners or the agendas that the schools give because I don't know too many students that know where that is right now. But so this is a calendar that they literally have in their binder in my classroom with the custom stickers. And believe it or not, the kids like stickers even in high school. So they put the little stickers, they'll use colored pens, they'll go all crazy and really make their calendars look pretty. You would think there's a contest or something, but if it makes them more organized, I let them go at it. But I give them all the stickers so there's no excuses. They know what the deadlines are. They know what to expect. And now they can look at it and there's no confusion as to when something is due and when something is not due. So they can look at that and they know, okay, this is coming up. I need to allow myself some study time, right? So they can prioritize their time and they determine how they should allocate it more efficiently, including if they're in a sport or something like that. If they see when their games are, I said, put your game schedule on there because you need to know if you have a big game the night before a big test, you need to put that on there. So they're putting not just that, but their life, because we want that balance. So I said, put everything possibly down that you need to on this calendar so you can see it, so you can allocate your time. So eventually you will now learn how to multitask. You'll be able to do more than one thing. Now my classroom is set up in an extremely organized fashion. I model the organization from the moment they walk in the classroom. So they come into my classroom. What do? their finger scanner, right? They're checking in with their finger scanner. They then walk over to the cell phone lockers. Yes, cell phone lockers that they put their cell phones in, because in the healthcare, you can't have your phone out. So we have cell phone lockers. Then they go over to the mailboxes, check their individual mailboxes for anything I might be communicating to them, returning tests or anything like that. And then they sit down at their desk space. And that is their workspace that they set up. They pull out their notebook and they write down their daily LEQ into their notebook. And that daily LEQ is actually a certification review question, because what they're actually doing is they're organizing all of the topics and a study guide to help them with their certification exam. So that notebook is used for 2 years. And they set that up. So I'm showing them how to organize and prepare and study for something 2 years out, right? We're doing it from the time that they first sit down into the classroom. And then we go ahead and we start class. This routine gives structure for students that they later are able to develop these organizational skills on their own. I think the biggest thing we assume is the kids know, what to do and how to do it. You need to take that time, step back and say, this is how you do it. I always say, you can put they put additional stuff and they use colored pens and stuff like that. I'm not saying you must do it this way, but I am teaching the skill set and showing and modeling it for them. They obviously can adapt it however they like. It's not my way or the highway, but you need to show them somehow, because they don't know how to do it at all. So usually they're getting a calendar. If you've seen some agendas, there's nothing in it at all. So you need to teach them and guide them how to actually use a calendar and to set everything up. Another great way to teach time management is to set up time limits for tasks, including tests. All right. This gets them to use deadlines and how to organize their time and tasks within a time frame. All certification exams are timed, right? So therefore, I have them, every test they take is timed. I put a time on the board, and in the beginning of the school year, I give them double the amount of time. But when I get done, the certification exam that I give is so many questions. I figured out it's an average of a minute per question. So if I have a quiz, right, that has, 30 questions on it, well, then they're going to get 30 minutes for that, right? Because it's going to be allotted the same. So I try to instill that so they understand what is it like to work within a time frame. And it also relieves the stress, because as I'm slowly chipping away in the time, by the time they're ready for their certification exam, they're like, oh, I got done early, because they learned how to allocate that time better. Now, of course, if students have IEPs, you definitely follow the directives of the IEP. But once again, if the IEP says they get half the time and then you now go ahead and double it, now you get full time, so you can add that up. So you don't ignore IEPs, but you can adjust them to work with this type of deadline as well. Binder checks, my students keep binders. They're told they need to bring them in the first day of school, and those binders are set up. They all have their employee ID number on the spine, so I know whose is whose. There's not their names, it's just their employee ID number, which is the same as their time clock, which is also the same number on their desk, by the way. They all have numbers on their desks, and every day those numbers are moved onto a different desk, because one of those other employability skills is flexibility. And so therefore, you never know what you're going to do every day you walk into work, right? Some days you have no idea what's going to happen with the phone calls or something like that. So they change every day where their desk is going to be. So those numbers are their employee ID number, and I put them on their binders, and in that binder, they store their notebooks that have their LEQs, any handouts, worksheets, and their calendar. And these are routinely checked. I do give a grade and feedback for binder checks, and that they have on their calendar when I'm going to be looking at their binder. And I will give them tips, and I will say, you might want to do this chronologically, or I might say, you were weak in this particular test area, you should put this worksheet with it. So when you're ready to study for this and your certification exam, you have it ready. So help them and guide them along of how to organize within their binder. But once they do that, it helps teach them how to become more organized. And lastly, one of the best ways to teach time management and organization is through problem or project-based learning. I'm not sure if you're familiar with PBL, but students choose a project, and it has to be related to a real world problem or situation. It's not a made hypothetical type of thing. It's a real situation. And they set a timetable and they complete a project over whatever that time frame is. You can do short term like a month, but my seniors actually do it for their entire senior year. So you start off with small PBL types of things, and then you can help them develop that over time. But they have benchmarks, and they have to know they have to have certain parts of the project done along the way. And a problem based would be just within the classroom. Project would be out in the community, working with people outside, business partners and things like that. So they can be as small as you'd like or as large as you'd like, but it teaches them how to manage their time because it's a big project over. It's not like something you do for a chapter. It's much bigger on scale. So therefore they have to become more organized and use that timetable in order to figure out how to complete that. Now, once a student has developed these employability skills, it's time to help them find a job. And it is crucial to teach them how to search for a job that fits their experience, their knowledge, and the biggest is their expectations, because boy, don't they have big expectations, right? So one of the biggest reasons students don't get a job they apply for is because they don't meet the requirements for the job. Many times it's the language in the ad that the students overlook or they just didn't understand that led them astray. So what I do is I have my entire class search for jobs during a class and then decipher and decode the language in the ad. And that helps them better understand if it is a right fit or match for them and their qualifications. So here's some examples I have on this slide. The biggest hurdle is when students try to find a job in healthcare before they graduate. So I worked in a VOTEC school district and all the seniors were expected to have co-op jobs during their senior year. Well, this means they're not high school graduates yet. They're still in their senior year. So the first thing I point out in an ad is you don't want to find an ad that says high school diploma required. But if you see one that says preferred, that means they'll take a student that hasn't graduated yet. So look for the words preferred and required. If the word required is noted anywhere in the ad and you don't meet that qualification, you can't be considered for that position. So for example, if an ad says minimum of 2 years experience required, that means it's not an entry-level job. You do not qualify for that. Do not apply. You are not going to get that. Okay. They kind of look through that. They don't really read the words preferred or required. Once they understand the difference between those two, then they're applying for the correct jobs or the jobs that are suitable for them. Also, if an ad says multiple locations, well, that may mean you might have to travel between locations. So you either need reliable transportation or you need to consider this before applying. Did you want to work at one particular place? I mean, a lot of places have multiple facilities. So you need to ask if you get to the interview process, do you have to travel? A lot of times the ad will say that. But to me, the first red flag to me is if it says multiple locations, they put it in there because most likely you might have to cover for somebody in another location one day. So are you able to do that? Look at the ad and see if it says that. Flexible. That to me is the big red flag for some students because they don't understand what they mean by flexible. I said, do you know what flexible means in that ad? And they said, no. I said, well, flexible means that every day you come in, you might have to be doing something different. Your job responsibilities might change. When you work might change. Flexible might mean you might have to do certain hours one day and certain hours another. Where you work might change, might mean the flexible. So if a potential employer uses the word flexible, there's a definite reason why they put that word in the ad. So make sure that they understand flexible means you're going to have to give and take. It's not the same job and you don't have the same responsibilities necessarily all the time. A lot of ads now say some extended hours could be anticipated. Well, what does that mean? You are not getting out on time, are you? Right? So they have to understand that it isn't where the shop closes, the last patient hour is at 5 and it's done. Well, as we know, patients show up late, or there might be test results or something an emergency might happen, right? So if you see this in an ad and you need to get out on time because of a family obligation or your transportation needs, then you might want to reconsider applying for this position because the wording is stating that you might have to anticipate staying after hours or your workdays extended periodically because of the needs of the patient. Really important to make sure you bring that to their attention. The other thing that I see students, they think they can barter their way through a job. If it says full-time, part-time, or temporary. If an ad says full-time, then they're looking for somebody that they need that's going to work that many hours. So some students love all the description, the job qualifications and all the responsibilities, but it says full-time. I said, you can't answer that. How can you be a full-time employee? And they said, oh, but maybe they'll let me share it. I mean, no, if they put in full-time, they mean full-time. If it's part-time, some think, well, maybe they'll give me more hours than it says. It says 12 hours. Maybe I can get more hours out of them. Once again, don't go in with that mindset. Tell the student, if you want part-time, then apply for part-time. If you're looking for temporary, which means you do not want to continue this through the summer, when you graduate, you're done. Look for a temporary position then. So have them read that language to see the set hours and the responsibilities for that particular job. And then lastly, look for the words bilingual. You would think most students would understand that, but I have students that said, I took 2 years of Spanish. I can put down I'm bilingual. No, you can't. Unless you're fluent in another language, you don't say that you are bilingual, because the offices that have that down are expecting you to be able to communicate with a patient because of the demographics of their practice. So I do have students that feel that, you know, I took Spanish, I'm bilingual. Can you speak fluently, and can you understand it, and can you write it? If you can do all that, then you're truly bilingual. So definitely make sure you point that out, because if your students can help decipher and decode the language, then they're able to match it with their qualifications, and it'll just be a much more favorable job seeking experience for them, because then they're not feeling rejection over and over and over again. We want to make this a positive experience, not feeling rejected. Oh, I answered that ad and I didn't get considered. And then when I would read the ad going, okay, sounds great, but you don't meet this, and this, right? So make sure you take that time, how to dissect an ad, and that will help in the end of helping them find the correct job. All right, once they have found the ad to answer, it's time for your student to compose a cover letter and resume. And it's important to explain the purpose of each of these documents. So the purpose of the cover letter is to get the potential employer to want to look at the resume. The resume gets you the interview. The interview gets you the job, right? So a lot of students think that the cover letter is optional. No, it's not. You are always going to do a cover letter. And that's because you are going to stand out amongst everybody else, and you're going to show that you took the time to look at that and actually want to answer that ad. You never write a cover letter that says to whom it may concern. You take the time and write, dear hiring manager, dear HR manager, right? And you always include the information in a cover letter that's not on the resume. It's not a regurgitation of the resume. This is your hook. This is to get them excited to want to go ahead and look at your resume. Also, I tell them to do their research on the facility, look for their missions and their goals and things like that, and tie that into the cover letter. The resume's purpose is to get that interview. And I always make sure that they have all their information professionally done, change their emails, no student emails, make sure it's a reputable email, make sure their resumes are specific for that job. I told them you need multiple resumes. It's not a one and done, but their page should be one, because it's the rule of thumb is 1-page resumes equals 10 years experience. Look at the style. Usually I introduce a functional style, which is showing their knowledge rather than experience, because they don't have any. I get asked a lot, template versus no template. Well, no template, because our students don't have enough information to input into a template. And then they have these blank sparse areas on their resume. Always make sure the language matches the advertisement. If they're doing an online ad and they're putting the resume in, they need to understand that they need to look at the ad and look at the language. So if it says a student, the job requires vital signs, don't have blood pressure on your resume. The computer doesn't pick that up. It doesn't know that a blood pressure is a vital sign. It has to match. A computer scans the first 100 words of a resume, and it needs a 70% match to make it to the next phase of an interview process. So you need to front load those keywords in that ad into the resume in order for that resume not to get shot down by the computer. It's not even getting seen by a person yet. It's a computer scanning it. So you have to make sure those keywords are front loaded. And make sure the format of the resume is good so it doesn't become all jumbled. I always say, make sure you email yourself that resume so it doesn't look all jumbled for the format. And then finally, proof and review and update. Always keep your resume updated. When you're doing interviews, it's important to make sure they're ready for that. And I prep them by doing a fun fashion do's and don'ts. We get pictures and then we all vote and held up signs, whether it's a do or a don't outfit to wear to an interview. I make sure they also look at all the interview questions, the top 10, and then they write their answers down, and then they tape themselves saying those answers so they can see themselves. They can see how many times they say or like. And then I do a rapid speed dating kind of thing where I have them do rapid interviews. They have a 3-minute timer and they move around and they're the interview and the interviewee. And then they decide who the top 3 candidates, and those top 3 candidates then move on to a real interview with a staff member in the building that they don't know. And they get videotaped. And then those all get chosen for the job. I also do video interviews with my business partners. And this has actually resulted in students getting job offers. Once again, it's collaboration, and they're also getting that real feeling of doing a video interview. And I always let them know that most students are afraid of interviews. They think it's nerve-wracking, but I explain to them, you want to find out if they're right for you just as much as they're trying to figure out you're right for them. So you should go in there excited to learn about them and not nervous about, oh my God, what are they going to ask me? It's like, you're there to get information as well. It's a two-way street. And once they realize that, they change their mindset. For networking, I suggest that students reach out to personal physician offices. Start there. They might know of other places, or they might have openings. Definitely look at volunteer programs that are out there. You can start as a volunteer, and you can put volunteer type of things on your resume. It shows your service. Community service projects, HOSA once again is a great source for that to help with networking. And most importantly, every single student should have a LinkedIn profile. Absolutely. Every single one of my juniors creates a LinkedIn profile in my class, and I teach them how to reach and connect first with school alumni, then with future places of employment, HOSA also, anyone who's involved in HOSA, and future post-secondary institutions. And they build up that network right away. And believe it or not, you can also apply for jobs within that. And you don't have to worry. They can be, their profile will look at, and they're like, wait a minute, they might actually get reached out. I've had 2 students that were approached in LinkedIn for jobs. They didn't have to go look for them. They were found just by having their LinkedIn profile. So I believe my time is up. I know I tried to talk really fast, but I'm originally from New York. So there goes the fast talking. But thank you once again. I'm Linda Wirt. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me. That is my LinkedIn profile is right here on the screen as well. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. And if, like Nancy said, if your group are interested in any types of presentations, these are just some of the topics that I've presented in the past. I've done them for Nishi, and I also have done them for ACT as well. So these are just some of the topics that I present, and I would love to come and help your organization or your group of teachers. And thank you once again, Nancy, for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome, Linda. Thank you so much. Yeah, we were listening fast to that. Really appreciate all the good ideas. There were lots of thank yous, great presentation. They're saying great information. Thank you. And I'll send you the chat
Okay.
for the email addresses of those teachers who were interested in that medical facility project that you described.
Okay.
And we look forward to perhaps hosting you in our spring lineup for Wednesday webinars, maybe one of these topics that you have listed here.
Sure.
Teachers love hearing from teachers, and they love it when you say in my classroom and this in my classroom, because then they can envision that for themselves. And the fact that you have an organized classroom does not surprise me at all.
Yeah, it's a little, some people over the top, but I'm telling you, and anytime a supervisor wanted to come in, they're like, your students know exactly what I was like, yep, it is routine. And that's what I want them to do, is have a routine. So